The Washington Post. Democracy dies in darkness. Opinions. Amber Heard. I spoke up against sexual violence, and face our culture's wrath. That has to change. Opinion by Amber Heard. December 18, 2018 at 3:58 p.m. MST. Amber Heard is an actress and ambassador on women's rights at the American Civil Liberties Union. I was exposed to abuse at a very young age. I knew certain things early on, without ever having to be told. I knew that men have the power, physically, socially and financially, and that a lot of institutions support that arrangement. I knew this long before I had the words to articulate it, and I bet you learned it young, too. Like many women, I had been harassed and sexually assaulted by the time I was of college age. But I kept quiet. I did not expect filing complaints to bring justice, and I didn't see myself as a victim. Then 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out. Friends and advisors told me I would never again work as an actress, that I would be blacklisted. A movie I was attached to recast my role. I had just shot a 2-year campaign as the face of a global fashion brand, and the company dropped me. Questions arose as to whether I would be able to keep my role of Mayra in the movies, Justice League and Aquaman. I had the rare vantage point of seeing, in real time, how institutions protect men accused of abuse. Imagine a powerful man as a ship, like the Titanic. That ship is a huge enterprise. When it strikes an iceberg, there are a lot of people on board desperate to patch up holes, not because they believe in or even care about the ship, but because their own fates depend on the enterprise. In recent years, the Me Too movement has taught us about how power like this works, not just in Hollywood but in all kinds of institutions, workplaces, places of worship or simply in particular communities. In every walk of life, women are confronting these men who are buoyed by social, economic and cultural power, and these institutions are beginning to change. We are in a transformative political moment. The president of our country has been accused by more than a dozen women of sexual misconduct, including assault and harassment. Outrage over his statements and behavior has energized a female-led opposition. Me Too started a conversation about just how profoundly sexual violence affects women in every area of our lives. And last month, more women were elected to Congress than ever in our history, with a mandate to take women's issues seriously. Women's rage and determination to end sexual violence are turning into a political force. We have an opening now to bolster and build institutions protective of women. For starters, Congress can reauthorize and strengthen the Violence Against Women Act. First passed in 1994, the act is one of the most effective pieces of legislation enacted to fight domestic violence and sexual assault. It creates support systems for people who report abuse, and provides funding for rape crisis centers, legal assistance programs and other critical services. It improves responses by law enforcement, and it prohibits discrimination against LGBTQ survivors. Funding for the act expired in September and has only been temporarily extended. We should continue to fight sexual assault on college campuses, while simultaneously insisting on fair processes for adjudicating complaints. Last month, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos proposed changes to Title IX rules governing the treatment of sexual harassment and assault in schools. While some changes would make the process for handling complaints more fair, others would weaken protections for sexual assault survivors. For example, the new rules would require schools to investigate only the most extreme complaints, and then only when they are made to designated officials. Women on campuses already have trouble coming forward about sexual violence. Why would we allow institutions to scale back supports? I write this as a woman who had to change my phone number weekly because I was getting death threats. For months, I rarely left my apartment, and when I did, I was pursued by camera drones and photographers on foot, on motorcycles and in cars. Tabloid outlets that posted pictures of me spun them in a negative light. I felt as though I was on trial in the court of public opinion, and my life and livelihood depended on myriad judgments far beyond my control. I want to ensure that women who come forward to talk about violence receive more support. We are electing representatives who know how deeply we care about these issues. We can work together to demand changes to laws and rules and social norms, and to right the imbalances that have shaped our lives.
Amber Heard to testify in Johnny Depp case behind closed doors. Actor is key witness in libel proceedings brought by Depp against the Sun newspaper. Jim Watterson, media editor. Wet 8 APR 2020 13.46 Eastern Daylight Time. Last modified on Thursday 9 APR 2025.35 Eastern Daylight Time. Lawyers for Depp argued Heard's involvement in the Me Too movement meant she could not request privacy when giving evidence. Photograph, Sarah Morris Getty. Amber Heard will be allowed to give evidence about alleged sexual violence at the hands of her ex-husband Johnny Depp behind closed doors, after lawyers successfully argued she should not be forced to make certain claims in front of the media. Heard is a key witness in a libel case in which Depp is suing the Sun newspaper and its associate editor, Dan Wooten, over an article that referred to the Pirates of the Caribbean star as a wife-beater. Depp's lawyers claimed Heard has been using salacious claims to draw attention to the case and questioned her desire to give parts of her evidence without journalists in the room. She hasn't sought anonymity, quite the opposite, argued David Sherburne, acting for Depp. He said Heard's accusations would be proved to be outright lies and said they would need to be scrutinized very carefully. He argued Heard's decision to identify as a prominent supporter of the Me Too movement and publicly take part in United Nations events about sexual violence meant she could not later request privacy when giving evidence. Is it really the case that she is so distressed that it is necessary for the principle of open justice to be overturned? Asked Sherburne. He later added, he, Depp, is in the worst of all worlds, where it is said very publicly that he committed acts of sexual violence but the details of them will be heard behind closed doors. Mr. Justice Nicole, having heard the arguments from Depp's legal team and Adam Walensky QC for NGN, who made the case on Heard's behalf, ruled the nature of the sexual violence claims being made by Heard meant she should be allowed to give evidence behind closed doors, the matters which will be dealt with in private or of a different order to what has been made public so far. I am satisfied that there is good reason to treat them differently. Heard previously obtained a domestic violence restraining order against Depp in 2016, shortly after she filed for divorce. In a separate case, Depp is personally suing Heard for libel in the U.S. over an opinion piece she wrote for The Washington Post in 2018 about being a public survivor of abuse, which did not specifically mention Depp. The British libel trial had been expected to start at the end of March and was expected to feature a string of celebrity witnesses. However, it was adjourned 2 weeks ago after the judge concluded it was impossible to call on witnesses to travel from around the world due to the coronavirus pandemic. One key issue is the circumstances in which Depp lost the tip of one of his fingers while filming the fifth Pirates of the Caribbean film. Around the same time, the duo were at the center of a storm over bringing their dogs to Australia. Depp says Heard inflicted the injury on him, while Heard claims Depp did it to himself while on a 3-day booze and drugs bender. The hearing on Wednesday morning took place on a Skype conference call, with the judge, journalists and lawyers dialing from as far afield as Australia to watch a sometimes unusual hearing, which was occasionally interrupted by patchy internet connections. Leading lawyers made impassioned pleas over their webcams, while the spare bedrooms of leading legal figures were on display for all to see. When the hearing entered a private session, the judge ordered journalists covering the case to hang up the Skype call, with a clerk checking that no reporters remained on the conference call. A spokesperson for Heard welcomed the ruling. We welcome Mr. Justice Nicole's decision to allow evidence relating to sexual violence to be heard in closed court. There is simply no reason for such sensitive evidence to be exposed to the world's press. We are pleased that the court made this order despite Depp's troubling argument that Amber should not benefit from the right to privacy in relation to sexual violence, because of her public association with the Me Too movement and her advocacy for victims of sexual violence at the United Nations. The trial is scheduled to take place in July. This article was amended on April 9, 2020 to remove references to David Sherburne being a Queen's Counsel. He has not been appointed to this position.